Shabbat Shalom. I just want to welcome everyone to the Sabbath Day conference call. This is Barbara. I'm serving as your host today, and Brother Pete is your co-host.
Yes, we're glad to have you with us on this for this important topic.
The topic today is the Lunar Sabbath moon worship. On one of our YouTubes, I had in the comments section, a gentleman wrote in there, and he said, "My pastor said keeping the lunar Sabbath is moon worship." So that's why we're doing this study today. Is that true? Is the lunar Sabbath a form of moon worship? Well, in Scripture, as well as in the written history of paganism, the sun is considered masculine and the moon feminine. Those who understand the Creator's calendar and creation Sabbath do not deny that pagans worshiped a sun god and a moon goddess. Indeed, mankind has exalted the creation over the Creator and has made gods of nearly everything under the sun, including the sun. And we did a video about this a couple weeks ago about people even worshiping the earth, Mother Earth. So Jericho equals, it's the same as its moon. That's the name, what it means. And this might be new information, but you can look it up for yourself. Jericho means its month. And so Jericho was a center for moon worship. And the first thing Yahweh had Israel do was to destroy a pagan moon worship system, and at the same time reestablish his own lunar solar calendar and Sabbath.
The Creator said not to worship the sun, the moon, the stars. Deuteronomy 4:19. And least thou lift up thine eyes unto heaven, and thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the host of heaven, shouldest be driven to worship them and serve them, which Yahweh thy Elohim hath divided unto all nations under the whole earth. Deuteronomy 17:3-5. The punishment for worshiping the sun, the moon, or stars is death. 17:3-5. And hath gone and served other gods, and worshipped them, either sun or moon, or any of the host of heaven, which I have not commanded. And it be told thee, and thou hearest it, and inquire diligently, and behold, it be true, and the thing certain, that such abomination is wrought in Israel, then thou shalt bring forth that man or that woman which hath committed that wicked thing unto thy gates, even that man or that woman shall be stone them with stones until they die.
So observing the new moon, is that considered moon worship? Yahweh commanded there be a holy convocation on new moon days. And here are 3 verses. There are many verses in the Scripture.
Numbers 10:10. Also in the day of your gladness, and in your solemn days, and in the beginnings of your months, ye shall blow with the trumpet over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings, that they may be to you for memorial before Elohim. I am Yahweh your Elohim. Ezekiel 46:1-3. Thou said, Yahweh Elohim, the gate of the inner court that looketh toward the east shall be shut for 6 working days, but on the Sabbath it shall be opened, and on the day of the new moon it shall be opened. Likewise the people of the land shall worship at the doors of this gate before Yahweh in the Sabbaths and in the new moons. Isaiah 66:23. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith Yahweh.
So moon equals month. The word month itself is related to the moon, and it originally measured how long it took for the moon to complete a cycle around the earth. So moon and month come from the same word. and that's from the British Museum. You can look up all these links. I'll leave them below for you to study. But we know that the word moon, everywhere in the Bible, originally the word month said the word moon. It didn't say month, it said moon, from one moon to another in all those verses.
Is observing the moon considered moon worship? Scripture says to observe the month, literally new moon, of Abib in Deuteronomy 16:1. In Exodus 12:17, we're told to observe the feast of unleavened bread. In Exodus 34:22, observe the Feast of Weeks, or Pentecost. In Deuteronomy 16:13, observe the Feast of Tabernacles. And in Exodus 31:16, observe the Sabbath for a perpetual covenant.
Should we then consider the sun, moon, and stars as evil? Is there anything wrong with observing these luminaries in the heavens? Well, here's a question. Are you worshiping your wristwatch if I ask you for the time and you look at it? Well, if not, then it is misguided to say that those who look to the heavens to tell what day it is are worshiping the moon. The biblical calendar. How do we know when Yah's holy convocations are? How do we know to observe them? Well, Psalms 104:19 says he appointed the moon for seasons. The sun knows it's going down. So he appointed the moon so we would know the seasons and the times to observe and to worship him.
Psalm 104:19, the moon is for seasons. The moon, one of the luminaries, also regulates the signs and seasons. Understanding the Hebrew words may shed some light upon the heavenly luminaries regulates these segments of time or events. The underlying Hebrew word for seasons is moedim, and that's Strong's H4150. It is also translated elsewhere in Scripture, set times, times appointed, and feasts.
So observation is done with the eyes. Every one of Yahweh's appointed times are regulated by the moon as certain numbered days of the month, or moonth. It is impossible to keep these appointed times without observing the moon.
The Creator's festivals, or appointments in time, are regulated by the moon, as Psalm 104:19 tells us. For example, the 14th day of the first month is Yahweh's Passover. You see, it's counted from the beginning of that moon. The first day of the 7th month is the Feast of Trumpets. Again, it is the beginning of the cycle of the moon for that month.
So our Sabbath's regulated by the moon. And the Sabbath is a moedim, and it is an appointed time. The new moon is day 1. As you can see in this calendar here, it shows the dates. And then there's 6 working days and a Sabbath. And the first quarter is the first Sabbath. That's on day 8. And then the full moon is the second quarter. And the last quarter is the third Sabbath. And then it goes back to the dark phase. So you can see it also up here. These show the weeks in the heavens and show us our calendar.
Question. If observing the moon, as commanded in Yahweh's word, is considered moon worship, then what is looking to the solar-only pagan calendar to regulate Sabbaths considered? Answer, it would be sun worship, of course. It surely can't be considered obedience to Yahweh's word because he says that the moon regulates his appointed times. Matthew 15:9 says, "In vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrine the commandments of men."
So the Julian calendar removed all the new moon days. And the Sabbath was instituted, we know, at creation with Adam and Eve 6,000 years ago. The Julian calendar, from which we get the names of the week, is only 2,000 years old, while the Gregorian calendar, the version of the pagan, papal, Roman calendar observed today, your calendar on your wall or in your planner, is only 440 years old. It was established in 1582.
Yahweh did not create a solar-only repeating 7-day calendar. The clock on your wall or watch on your wrist are all arbitrary, man-made, counterfeit time-keeping devices.
In Isaiah 58, you will discover that the original Sabbath of creation is probably the final thing to be restored in the last days. I believe we're in the last days. Do you believe it? Well, there is prophecy in Revelation. The pure woman in Revelation 12 shows that the remnant of Yah's people will have overcome. In Revelation 12:1 says, "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars."
Notice that she's not standing or stomping on the moon. The text says that the moon is under her feet. It is her foundation. Isaiah 66:23 says the creation Sabbath, a lunar event, will be restored in the last days. Genesis 1:14 says that the luminaries in the heaven, Yahweh's timepieces, are for signs and seasons. That's that Hebrew word moedim, days and years. Psalm 104:19 says that the moon is appointed for seasons, again moedim, the appointed times. Leviticus 23:1-3 reveals that the Sabbath is the first day of Yahweh's feast. Same Hebrew word, moedim.
And Isaiah 58:12 says, "And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places. Thou shalt raise up the foundations of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in." These are the last days, and the old waste places are being rebuilt, and the old paths are being restored. Isaiah 58:12 is saying, you will build the old waste places. You will raise up the foundations of many generations. You are called, and you will restore the paths. And the ancient paths of the Sabbath is one of the major paths that's being restored. So, as it says in Isaiah 66:23, we're always going to have new moons and Sabbaths. It shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith Yahweh. So that concludes our study right now. But today we did our recording session with all our fellowship group. They're right here. I like to think about them sitting around the table with us here as we do our study. And I just want to welcome the ones that are here to make a comment. Or Brother Pete, would you like to make a comment first? And then we'll go around the circle, and whoever would like to make a comment today, for those that are watching this YouTube and maybe they're new to this whole Creator's Calendar, that you can tell them something or give them a thought.
I do have a thought, and that is going back to the original question or the original point that some pastor had said that keeping Sabbath by the moon was moon worship. That's a pretty lame argument, to be frank. It almost doesn't need an answer, and in fact, it displays let's call it an ignorance or an unknowledge, or let's just say a flailing dismissal of something that they don't want to consider. Anyway, that was just a thought I had about it.
Could I make a comment?
Yeah, I heard you chuckle a little. Yes, you can. But this guy put in a real comment that his pastor told him it was moon worship. But yes, go ahead with your comment, brother.
Yeah, so you should ask them if they believe in the worship of Saturn.
Right.
Absolutely.
Gabriel here. If you are a pastor and you not support the Sabbath that results from sun and moon, you indirectly or directly, knowingly or unknowingly, you support the papacy, because the Sabbath comes on not Saturday or comes from Rome. And Saturday, we have so many proofs that Saturday it's coming from Rome. It's very simple. So if you are a preacher, we really advise you, ask you, suggest you, just go and study the facts.
I would like to speak. I wanted to point out that the calendar itself, of course, many of your consecutive, call it consecutivists, of course, they hold to a story, as Gabriel says, a narrative, that there has been a keeping of this consecutive Sabbaths, Sundays, since the creation of the world. However, as Gabriel says, that's the narrative. But go find the history. Stop. It's a tradition. We're told that our fathers told, which our fathers told, and what does the Bible say? It says we have received lies, nothing but lies from our fathers, because traditions get distorted, they get erred, they have to be corrected. And how are they corrected? By going back and examining the evidence and the truth and the scriptures and, of course, Revelation. But if you look at the consecutives, there is really no history. What somebody would ask this question is, what culture was keeping that consecutives? If you say it's Judaism, if you say it's Israel, go back and look. You cannot find it. The scriptures are all based on lunar observations. And anything written, anything we're reading into it about consecutives is being read into it, not in the script itself. So, and find some artifacts, some stones carved showing how the consecutives were kept and who kept them. Find that chain of ownership that each culture that kept this consecutive tradition. It didn't exist. So really, those who are keeping consecutive Sabbaths are trusting absolutely in tradition as it was handed to them without questioning it. And, adding to what Gabriel said, there is, say a lie loud enough and long enough, like 1,000 years, 2,000 years, and people will believe it. It doesn't matter how foolish it is. They will just follow it, hook, line, and sinker.
Okay, and I think I'm going to close the recording right now. And someone reminded me that I should ask people to like the video, the YouTube video, when they watch it, because it helps YouTube find our channel. So you can like it and you can share it, but we appreciate everyone that's here today. I'm just going to close the recording and then stand by for more conversation.